Democrats in New Hampshire are pushing forward with a write-in campaign for Joe Biden in tomorrow's primary. The president will not appear on the ballot because he opted instead to support a primary calendar that puts South Carolina as the first contest. This in spite of the Granite State's constitutional stipulation that it must be the first primary in the nation. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall. Hunter, good to see you. So explain this to viewers who may be wondering why the president chose to be a write-in candidate.
Absolutely. This is a tense situation. You had President Biden, after he finished 5th in the New Hampshire primary as a candidate, he decided, along with DNC allies, that he and many other leaders on the DNC wanted a revised primary calendar. They wanted to see South Carolina, a far more diverse state than New Hampshire, be the first primary. That set off, a very tense situation between New Hampshire Democrats and national Democrats. And the result is that, New Hampshire said, we're still going to hold our primary. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth. A very controversial letter from DNC officials called New Hampshire's contest on Tuesday meaningless. New Hampshire Democrats obviously do not feel that way. They've said it's important. Many plan on writing in President Biden's name because they want to try and help his re-election effort and also try and help their chances at remaining an early voting primary state come 2028.
So let's talk about where this all came from, because the president wants South Carolina to be the first in the nation primary. And part of the argument is, well, South Carolina is more diverse. It looks more like the rest of the country. But it's not just that it looks more like the rest of the country.
Well, and that's the major thing. I mean, South Carolina gave President Biden, or at that point, former Vice President Biden, a huge victory in the 2020 primary. It revived his campaign. It essentially put him on a path to the Democratic nomination. And this has been tough for New Hampshire Democrats. President Biden has run for president, 3 times before this. He never made it to New Hampshire in the 1988 race. He, in 2004, got out right after the Iowa caucuses. 2008 got out right after the Iowa caucuses, and then 2020, obviously, he finished 5th, and that was tough. Allies I've talked to in the state, explained it was a tough race for him, and he obviously wasn't thrilled with the result. Now, he hasn't spent a lot of time in New Hampshire since then. He has visited New Hampshire twice as president. There have been cabinet secretaries that have come to New Hampshire to, obviously tout the administration's work, but it's, again, a difficult topic for New Hampshire Democrats. It's a difficult topic for allies in the state, and at the same time, there are 2, relatively major Democrats who will appear on New Hampshire's primary ballot. You have Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson. Williamson, of course, ran for president in the 2020 cycle against Biden.
So, Hunter, let me play that guy who doesn't live his life in the Beltway and doesn't follow all the horse racing and betting that goes on in the world of politics. And they go, look, country's facing some serious issues. Individual states are facing serious issues. Why is this a big deal? Why does New Hampshire care? Why does South Carolina care? Couldn't the people who run those states, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republicans in the case of what's going on tomorrow morning, just focus on other things and leave this archaic way of how we pick presidents, which is from a bygone era, to something more modern? Why should people care?
It's a great question, and I'm a reporter who's worked in Kansas, and I've worked in New Hampshire, and I completely understand that view. And I think the big thing is, when I talk to people in New Hampshire, they do realize there are major stakes in this election. That many of these Democratic voters, are concerned about the likelihood that former President Donald Trump is likely going to be the Republican nominee, and they understand. They talk about democracy, they talk about reproductive rights, and they're concerned, about what could happen in this general election, and they want to help the president show that he's a strong general election candidate. Now, that obviously contrasts with Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips, who's running, in this New Hampshire primary against President Biden, and is saying he's concerned that Biden will lose in November to former President Trump, and that's the heart of his campaign. Obviously, Biden is the oldest ever sitting incumbent president. Dean Phillips is much younger, is calling for change, calling for generational change, and I mean that's a big test as we look at this Tuesday contest, and it's definitely something to watch.
All right, Hunter Woodall, thank you so much.
Thank you.